Angie, how are you?
I'm good. I'm feeling quite tired, but in like a happy tired kind of way. Um, I guess I'm grateful to have like the record to focus on at the moment, and I'm also just like feeling, the intensity of the world happening around us and trying to hold, a lot of grief with that as well. But I feel lucky just to like, be talking about music to people. Like this week leading up to the record coming out, it's just a lot of like this, like conversing with people about music. And it's like, it's pretty nice. So yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
That's good to hear. And obviously, yeah, the world is in a state at the moment. Well, it feels like it has been for a while. And I found if you focus on other stuff, at least you get uh some decent happy thoughts. So an album, that's always fun to talk about. Now, there is something I read that you said in an interview that it's always kind of this negotiation about how you feel about the record at any certain point. How do you feel about it today?
Um, I feel proud of it. Today I got a box of physical records like to give to my band and stuff. And I think it makes a difference having it in physical form
Mm,
because you have evidence of the work, made manifest. And something that I struggle with when I'm feeling down on myself about it, and like when my inner critic is loud, um, is that trying to balance that out is all internal and it's all like a mental climb. But today it's just a simpler thing. It's sort of like, oh, you're unsure about yourself. Look at this thing you made that you can hold in your hand, you know? So I think this is maybe an easy part of the or easier part of that cycle because um I get really hard on myself about having made the wrong decisions about stuff or like not knowing what decision to make, like in the
mm,
production and in the mixing of the record. And is this song finished? Can I sign off on it? Is the record finished? Like I find that stuff really triggers my self like comparisons to other people and
mm,
like self-loathing and stuff. And um that's always fun. But like this week and like being this close to the record being out, like it's all done. Like I don't have any more decisions to make. And I can just kind of like practice acceptance and being at peace with everything that I've learned and everything that I've made and not have to like, yeah, I don't have to pour any more uncertainty out. Like I can just, it's like a reflection
mm.
moment. And I'm just kind of looking at the stuff that it's taught me, and like I'm really big on learning. And yeah, so I'm happy to say I feel like quite good about the record this month. But yeah, you're right. Like sometimes I have not, like sometimes I've felt really wonky about it, but that's part of it, I guess.
But I think you talk about something interesting within any creative endeavor, I would say, which is doubt. And there's always that thing in the back of your mind: is this good enough? Will people like this? Especially when you want to share that art. Um, whenever you started songwriting, was it different? Was there less doubt when there was no attention in a way?
I think so. Yeah. I've always been pretty slow at it. Like I've probably always been navigating doubt through the process, but it definitely changes when you're using it um for your like income, and like that
Mm,
it's a business. So I guess um the stakes change a little bit, and I think that can create more doubt and more fear. Um and yeah, I think when I started, like I was pretty unsure, but yeah, I had no one to answer to. Like I wasn't sharing the songs with anybody, and I wasn't. relying on them to yeah, I wasn't familiar with the external like validation or criticism that comes with it.
Mm.
Um, and now I guess I've had to challenge like why the doubt is allowed to get so loud and why it's so powerful. Like, what is the fear at the root of it? And sometimes I understand it and sometimes I don't. But like, that's been really important is to recognize like when that feeling is really
Mm.
big, um, to try and inspect it and pull it apart a little bit. And because it can be like paralyzing and,
Yeah.
um, then like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because then you don't get any work done and then you know it's your fear of failing is right in front of you. So yeah, it's been like a nice journey. I'm quite interested, like I've always been quite interested in trying to get to the root of things and trying to understand my feelings. Like that's I think that's what made
Mm.
me into a songwriter is trying to understand what's happening inside of me. So the doubt and like the fear, that's been a big theme of this record even and like just of my the last few years of my life is um trying to understand the why and I think it has always been there but it definitely is louder like the the more I have to lose or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, was there something specific that set you on that path of kind of exploring yourself and why you feel a certain way? There's this phrase, um, what is it again? Paralysis by analysis, and that's something I kind of figured out that I have to deal with because I overanalyze things a lot. So that's one of the realizations. But for you, when did you kind of start on that path of trying to figure out why you were feeling certain ways?
um I mean realistically like probably entering high school like
Okay, okay.
you know like changing social spaces and hierarchies and um all the confusion that came with like relating to the people around me and
Mm.
you know like being a young woman going through puberty. um I went to a private girls school like a Catholic
Okay.
girls school and like um I was you know you start being socialized in a way that is like it just wasn't
Mm.
in alignment with like who I am and I was also really confused by that. I didn't know that at the time, and so I think that like confusion, being a teenager, like I just started writing, and um, I have always been someone who like Googles really basic questions, like wiki how, you know, like wiki how that
Sure,
website,
sure.
like how do you uh ask your friend if they really your friend, or like uh how do you start talking to someone at a party? Like I would always like Google these things. Like I just always felt like socially inept, like I was missing the language for something and I kept it really private as well.
Mm.
And so songwriting and also just like yeah, generally trying to understand that stuff was a really internal and secret thing that I have done all my life. And it's only now like being a bit older and being able to like look at it that I can sort of laugh at it and be like, oh, this is the way that I am. Like you know, I have had like a psychologist help me see that like I might be on the autism spectrum. And like often that's
Okay.
what like women with autism might do is like try and desperately understand how to fit into these like social norms and maybe even find a tool or like a special interest, which I think for me was like songwriting and storytelling
Mm.
and obsessing over feelings. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I'm still kind of unraveling that one, but that uh, it's funny to look back on now and be like, oh, it's probably because I was like an autistic 14-year-old, like trying to figure out how to be in the world, you know?
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, as you mentioned, I mean, it's not a there's no cure for it in a sense that you figure something out and all of a sudden everything's fixed. I mean, it's a continual process, I suppose. But
Right.
the role of music within that then, because I find it very interesting, because I always see what artists do. I mean, you have to be very vulnerable, and we talked about it out earlier, but to what was the decision then for you to share that vulnerability and share those thoughts with the outside world?
I guess it's been what comes naturally. Like it's primarily a therapeutic process for me. Um, it's the only space where I feel comfortable to be that vulnerable, or at
Mm,
least like usually that's been the case. I'm trying to work on it, communicate authentically what you are feeling to the people in front of you through language. But like music has been a portal into it. And so
mm,
um that it just felt like opening a door for myself, like for my life. And I guess uh people start hearing the songs and then I can feel like they're connecting to it and I'm kind of like, okay, like this works or it goes beyond me. But it started, as a therapeutic practice. And it's funny, like my dad, he's a big music fan
mm,
and he raised me on like um Bob Dylan and um like folk songwriters and rock writers who would be and like Springsteen, like telling other people's stories and like
mm,
maybe being like activists and commenting on like the war and like the hardship of, whatever. But um he's always encouraged me and I like to write about other people's stories. Like I've had him support me throughout my songwriting life, like in an incredible way. But I have always struggled with that. Like I
mm.
just seem to not be able to, or haven't been able to develop that skill. And when I sit down to write, like sometimes I'm consciously trying to not be vulnerable about my own life, but it still ends up there. And like I don't, I've just started to see that as like, well, that's my magnetic center, and like that, I guess for whatever reason is like my purpose or my strength. And I don't really know why. And like it's felt like a disappointing thing sometimes and like a bit of a funny one like that I've navigated. Am I too self-absorbed? Like, is this serving anybody or anything? And I think I've come to understand that like there is a way that it can serve people and there also is a way that it can be really self-absorbed. And like, but yeah, I've asked myself that question and I just don't know. It just comes naturally.
No, but
Yeah.
I think both those things are true at the same time, right? Where it's on the one hand self-serving, but at the uh, other end of the spectrum, it's kind of this yeah collective thing that we do, making music and sharing it and being vulnerable. So, and this is a good kind of segue into the album Light, Dark, and Light Again, because when did you start to adjust kind of, or how did these songs kind of help you adjust your thoughts on this? Because for instance, a song like Letting Go and kind of acknowledging, well, some days I'm like this, some days I'm like this, and that's fine. How did you kind of arrive, or what helped you get there?
Um, like, I mean, yeah, I wonder.
Or maybe I should phrase it a little bit differently, but that idea of self-love and self-acceptance, I mean, that's, I think, a big thing on the album. And again, as I mentioned, that's not something you arrive at just randomly one day
Yeah,
and think, okay, now I figured it out. So how
totally.
did
Yeah.
how did the process of songwriting and music help you kind of understand some of those things and get at least some positive thoughts out of it?
Yeah, like it's been a great evolution for me to land in this place of trying to have a conversation with myself.
Mm,
Like a lot of this record is about my relationship with myself um and that has felt safer to write. Like I think I stopped feeling so safe or like I was on the right path if I was writing about other people necessarily. And like on my first record, there was a lot of raw early heartbreak, like first experiences of like, that big
mm,
gutting like pain um and it's pretty easy to blame other people and like project that outwards. Um and then with this record, like one of the first songs that I wrote for this no, the first song that I wrote on this record was Staying Down Low. It's like near the end of
Mm,
the record, and it's initially like I was writing it about someone else, like someone in my life and their struggle with depression. But when I finished the song and I kept returning to the song, um, I realized that firstly, like it wasn't really my place to comment on their experience with depression. And that was a bit of a like that was a bit of a turning point where I felt um like I had done something irresponsible or, like touched something too fragile or someone
mm,
else's space. Um, and then working through it and kind of reworking the song a little bit, I realized that actually the song works better if I consider it to be about me and my own depression. And this is alongside starting to understand like how psychology works and how like our conflicts with people are often just us projecting our own shit onto them. And like our relationships with people are like we see our mirror. And I don't think I understood that before. And I now am just much more aware of it. Like whatever it is that I'm struggling with in someone else has so much to do with whatever is going on inside of
mm.
myself. And I just like I maybe just reached that point in my life as well where I had to like look pretty hard at myself and um the way that the patterns that keep repeating themselves in like the relationships that I have, like friendships, everything. And
Sure.
um like yeah, maybe just getting advice from various sources, like people in my life and podcasts and whatever, that was sort of like, if you want to feel okay, it starts in your like relationship with yourself, doing your shadow work and expanding your capacity for self-compassion and your self-compassion practice. And I was just trying to pick up a self-compassion practice. Like I didn't have one. I wasn't nice to myself. I started learning that like we are subconsciously speaking negatively to ourselves like 80% of the time or something. And it just like blew my mind. I was like, what? Like maybe that's why I'm paralyzed. And like I needed to talk to myself nicer. And like I was saying
Mm,
before, like songs have been the way that I've figured out how to communicate and um where like the authentic thing comes out. And I was understanding that the relationship between like music flowing out of you and songs flowing out of you and like being in flow, the relationship between that and the subconscious mind is like very connected, right? It's like quite a thin veil. Like
sure.
sometimes a song comes out and you don't have any idea where it came from. And so I was consciously like trying to summon and like use that connection to just like plant seeds of kindness in my head. Like I
Mm.
was walking around my house saying to myself, like, it's okay, like, having my mental breakdowns and kind of being like, it's okay. And and then also like sitting down to write songs and being like, it's okay, it was all just a practice that I was really trying to develop and started like putting into the songs. And I wanted to feel like when I got up on stage, I'd be creating positive experience and energy for myself and other people. And um, yeah,
But I think you mentioned something crucial, which is kind of realizing that there is some control you have over your own thoughts, and that there is that you can steer it in a certain direction. And you mentioned staying down low, and kind of what stuck out to me in that song is you mentioned, I think, The Walking Dead, and kind of I wrote down the fictional apocalypse always at the forefront of my head. But I always talk with friends and stuff about mental diet and what you consume and how you and we talk about what's going on in the world. I studied as a journalist, and I can't watch the news anymore because I just get depressed all the time. So it's how do you navigate that? The fact that you mentioned kind of trying to create these positive things for yourself, but then there's so much coming at you all the time. How do you navigate that?
yeah. Well, I mean, even being aware of it, like you say, like having language for it has been pretty powerful because I guess you can't hide it from yourself. Like
Mm,
it's not like I'm super strict about what I do and don't consume, but I think I understand better like my own sensitivity and what I might be sacrificing if I do go into like too deep of a hole with something. And like I have quite an addictive personality, so I will still get hooked on like a toxic TV show, like a drama or whatever that and then disappear into that world until I binged it. But then I'll come out the other side and maybe just like understand, okay, rather than needing to like find the next show immediately, like just look at what you just did and maybe try and like balance it out for a couple of weeks, like maybe just even recognizing the power of that. Um, and yeah, I mean, like I am fascinated by the subconscious in a way that I just didn't really understand it before. I mean, I barely understand it now, but um it's funny, like there's such a limited amount of our minds that we are in control of. And so I guess I like thinking about it as just like, well, yeah, like what are the little things that I can
mm.
do? Um, but I don't know, like just being aware of it doesn't fix it. I need to remember that as well. Like I fall into the traps and it just depends. Like I've had seasons where I'm so conscious of like a mindfulness practice and really
Mm.
trying to like ground myself and center myself. Um, but the last couple months I've been really burnt out and like fully addicted to scrolling on my phone, and I can feel it infecting my
Mm.
brain. And yeah, I don't know. It's nice even just to talk to you about it, honestly, because I just feel like sometimes you just gotta like follow a river until like you can't follow it anymore, and then be like, oh fuck, I hit the ocean. Like I better turn around and go back.
No,
Yeah.
but I think this ties well into that idea of letting go of it's okay make mistakes, because I mean nobody's gonna do the right thing. I struggle with it immensely as well, because these days we have so much information about how to stay healthy, how to take care of your mental health. I mean, even the act of cooking sometimes makes me insane, because I have to do it every day, 3 times a week. So there's so much always to think of, and
Yeah.
then the thing of, and that's why a song like letting go I think is so good, because it's kind of that realization, well, I'm never going to be perfect, I'm never going to be, so embrace
Mm,
what you're doing at the moment. I mean, I have a book, it's really interesting, it's called Embracing the Ordinary. And
yeah.
it's kind of about, because in this day and age, especially with social media, everybody wants to be famous, everybody wants to be this and that, and that's kind of not telling you, but talking about how normal life is just normal. I mean, it's that's the way life is in a sense for a lot of people. So it's yeah, it's tricky to navigate all those things. But luckily, you have music, and for you then, because I think you went to, if I'm not mistaken, Durham, North Carolina. Um, musically, how ready were you to kind of show the ideas that you had to other people and kind of build them into what they've become now?
By that point I was pretty ready, but it took a long time to get there. Like I I feel like I fell over a few times, like
Mm,
there was some stumbles, like go into the studio, spend some money, try, think that I'm ready. Um, and then it just wouldn't feel right. And, sometimes it was about changing the people involved or changing the setting, but also like on a grander scale, I think, you know, it just took a while for me to feel like um I was strong enough to make a record, and like the universe wanted it to happen. Like it just took a while. But yeah, so I guess I experienced along the way like maybe what it looked like to show up and not be ready, and then like the crippling like disappointment and like self, like loathing that would come with that. Um so that was just part of the process. And then by the time last year came around, like by the start of last year, I had most of the songs, and I had maybe connected enough with like the feeling of failure. Like I just, instead of just being afraid of failing, I like literally felt like I had failed. Like I was just like, oh my God, I am so bad at this and everything is fucked. And like I just felt so deeply um like unsatisfactory that I kind of had to get to that point. And then
What? Why?
well, I wonder if I'll be able to articulate it, but you just reminded me as well when you're talking about like something else. My the, like one of my saving graces and helping like one of the things that guided me through that was this little Buddhism book that I
Mm,
bought. And I didn't know much about Buddhism, and it was by Pema Chodron, who's like a nun, like a Buddhist nun, and she had really simplified some like Buddhist ideas, like the tiny little pages. There'd be like a few sentences, and I would like read one page, and then the next day I'd read the next page, and it was just like opening my mind to like firstly that idea that you're talking about of like just being ordinary and just being where you are, and life has some suffering and life has some beauty, and like you don't need to be seeking and you don't need to be um but like you will, and also that's fine, and just kind of like this really calm, gentle way, just encouraging like a healthy relationship with failure and with fear and with like hitting rock bottom, and how like that is a really raw and beautiful place to be because
mm,
anything can be born out of that. And I think I felt like I had to hit rock bottom because of all the things that I was like clinging on to that I thought were like keeping me safe. Um, and then you're at rock bottom and you kind of like, I can't take any of this shit with me. Like it's just got to be me who climbs out. It's kind of like a rebirth thing. Like that's sort of how
mm,
I felt. And so by the time it came to making the like recording the record in Durham, like um it was a brand new experience for me to go into the studio and do, we had like 15 days to do a bunch of songs. I had to be prepared. I was like taking quite a big risk. I was pretty scared in some ways, and I knew that it was going to be challenging, but um, I was also just like really willing to take the risk and like challenge myself and be prepared. And like it just, I had got to the point, and like it took me time, like it took me a couple of years, but I'd finally got to the point that was like, you want to make this record, you're just going to have to be willing to fail. And that was easier because I felt like I had already failed. Like I felt like I'd already
mm.
hit rock bottom. And it's like, well, yeah, if that happens again, you can get out of it. And are you going to not go and try? Like, haven't you always wanted to go to America and make a record? Haven't you always wanted to learn from new producers and like, um, what is possible, beyond this like fear? So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. Sorry.
Oh no, I think you've worded that a lot better than I would have been able to. Um, and then on that, just a quick note, one other person, I don't know, maybe you've heard of him, Alan Watts is somebody I listen to a lot, and that has kind of given me a lot of calmness over the years. And then he's somebody who kind of introduced the Buddhist philosophy to the Western world.
Yeah.
But anyway, but but I find it interesting because kind of hitting that rock bottom, then climbing out of it, and I think it's beautifully put. You kind of leave everything behind because you realize I have to move forward, and then you make an album, and now that I don't know how long ago that was, because there's always this gap of releasing something, and then you have to sit with it. As we started this interview, you kind of have to negotiate every day. So with that in mind, and I wrote down a quote from a different interview. I can't remember what it was, but it's something along the lines of changing your expectations to meet the universe's intention. Now, you mentioned expectations just now, and it is how do you see success then in terms of what you do, or in terms of, or do you even think about it that way?
Yeah, I do. Um, I guess I see it. I think it used to be one of the things that I felt tied to. Like it used to be
Mm,
something that I felt like I could lose. Um, and or or that I was really afraid to lose. Like I had a lot to lose or something. And I think like I was saying earlier, what I've realized is one of my values is learning. Like that's one of my core values. It's one of the things I've always been like super interested in. And um that's been really helpful because I realized that failure is such a good teacher and success teaches you things, but um also I think in like in like the loss of success or the loss of power or the loss of self like grandness, um there's almost like more to learn, and I think um that's really hard. Like those places are really hard to be. But I now see success as like the other side of the coin. Like failure and
Mm,
success are uh they travel together the same way that like love and fear travel together,
mm,
um and like growth and loss travel together. And I think like I see it as something that is like, it's the yang that needs the yin or whatever. It's like it's not without pain. And I don't really know like how to define it for myself, but um I think I'm just less afraid of losing it. Like whatever it
mm,
is, like I have always been an ambitious person and like I've wanted to be like a touring, theater level artist like all over the world. And I still want that. I guess like I see success as like being able to keep connecting with people through songs and like do this as my job. But um it just doesn't like drive the car anymore. Like,
mm.
those ambitions are like I think success is like a slippery slope if it's going to be driving the car because you end up sacrificing, in my experience, um like for your ambition, like things that are more important. So I think um like I want to feel successful in like the healthiest way that I
Mm.
can, and like and if I think about it in like a spiritual way, like I do feel successful now. Like I feel like I'm um like practicing acceptance and like gratitude and having the opportunity to um like be mindful about the day, like that's successful. And like I just didn't used to see it in a spiritual way.
Mm.
um it's funny, like you have to keep your mind in yourself, like when you're making an album that's like a product and people are kind of like talking about sales and stuff. Like I'm listening to the conversations and I'm involved in them as a businesswoman. But I'm really grateful for like the piece of my mind that has definitely gotten bigger. That's just kind of like doesn't matter, like that's a relief.
That's great to hear. And I think that's a good place to end the interview. But may I thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
You too. Thanks for the really thoughtful questions. It's really nice to speak this way. I really appreciate it.